2.
I've seen that, which was confusing to me because, when all of this broke out, even early January, we heard all of us still calling it coronavirus. And,
Yes.
Dr. Tedros from the WHO came out to say, we have a name now. It's COVID-19.
Yeah.
19 meaning for 2019,
Yeah.
it was discovered coronavirus, so on and so forth. What is SARS-2? And is it a different strain, a variation of the strain that was picked up in terms of SARS?
No, 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 no. So remember, initially when this was first identified, yes, it was identified as the coronavirus, but it was then called a novel coronavirus, which just means that it's the first time it's identified and isolated from the human population. So at one point it was called NCOV, so novel coronavirus 2019. But for any new virus, you have a group of researchers coming together that would then look at symptoms caused, the characteristics of the virus, and they would be the ones who officially assign a name then to the coronavirus. So this one is now officially called SARS coronavirus 2, and purely for the fact that the symptoms are severe acute respiratory symptoms.
Okay.
So severe symptoms of the respiratory tract, including the lungs. And hence it's called SARS coronavirus 2 at the moment.
Okay, so how different is this one from the others?
So genetically, they are obviously similar. That's why they're in the same family. So I have students who's looked at some of the genetic makeup of it, and we see similarity depending on the region that you look at, above 90%, 92, 93%. But there is enough difference to make it a different virus. So it's not even sisters or brothers. They could be almost classified as cousins of the same family. And just to answer your earlier question, so you say that we know about SARS, we know about MERS, and then we know about this one. Let's call it COVID-19
Yes.
for the purposes of this conversation. The 4 others, nobody speak about them. Why do we know about these 3 only? These are the 3 that has been killing those infected. So the others are 229E, OC43, HKU1, and NL63. So
And
those are the other 4 that are not killing.
they're not killing,
They're not killing, but they circulate continuously through the human population.
which I guess is why on the little bottle we are being told that it kills coronaviruses.
Exactly.
Okay, so why do they not kill but the others do?
That's what we do not understand. So there are many hypotheses out there. If you look at the genetic makeup, they differ to those other 4. The 3 that do kill, they differ from the other 4 in very specific ways. So the hypothesis is that it could either be the genetic makeup, so there are proteins that are found in these that's not found in the others, or it could be where do they attach in the respiratory airway. So the other 4, they cause mild respiratory syndrome,
Okay.
common cold, which means that when they do attach, they attach to the upper respiratory tract,
Okay.
so they're not in the lungs really. These other 4 is low in the respiratory tract.
Okay.
So it can cause more severe because now the lungs become involved in the process.
So would the appropriate medical language be that COVID-19 is more virulent and
Yes.
it's stronger in nature?
So it is more virulent because it can cause more severe symptoms. But keep in mind, 80% of cases for COVID-19 is not severe.
Okay, because and if my figures are still correct, because it has a, what's it, 2%, 2 to 3% mortality rate.
At the moment, it looks between 3 to 4%, depending on
The country.
on the setting. Yeah.
Okay, and that's important. I want to talk about the setting. By the way, we are streaming this live to Facebook, so you can go and have a look there. We're talking to Professor Fielding. He's a molecular biologist who has studied coronaviruses and particularly SARS, and we're trying to understand, put into perspective what we're sitting with, because a lot of you have many questions, as do I, but I'm going to be guided by you guys. So if you have any questions, feel free to WhatsApp it through to us on 0786 10 11 12, or give us a call. Please, I don't want any broad conversations about the politics about this and that about the disease. Purely, this is a researcher that has done some research into coronaviruses, and we're here to pick his brain around what we are sitting with. How different is this from SARS and MERS, other than it being either more virulent or not virulent, the mortality rate, etc., etc.? Purely just from a medical perspective, is this worse?
No, it's not. And when I say no, it's not, I must be very careful. If you look at total numbers, this has infected vastly more people than both SARS and MERS. This is now on standing, what, 170,000 worldwide? SARS in the end infected about 8,000 worldwide. MERS, very localized, 28 countries only, but huge problem in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, for instance, and Jordan. In the end, and there are still ongoing cases, about 6,500 infected in total. However, what is the difference? SARS, of those 8,000 infected, killed 10%. MERS killed 37%. COVID-19, between 3 and 4%.
Okay, that's the mortality rate
Yes.
against the backdrop of how many infections,
Yes.
right? So when we earlier spoke about whether it's more virulent or not,
Yes.
comparative to SARS and MERS, how do we then measure the, let's call it the danger of COVID-19 comparatively to the others? Let's take away how many people died at the
Okay.
end of the day. Let's take away how many people were infected, purely just from a
From
medical
a virulence point of view.
Yes.
So not much difference. All three of them causes, in the end, or have the potential to cause severe respiratory issues. All three of them have been found in other organs, kidneys, livers. For SARS, there were studies to show that the brain, for instance, was affected. So virulence between the three, not much different.
So why is there then this level of, and this is a very awkward question to ask. I'll get to the hysteria and all of that a bit later. I'm going to ask you whether you think, this is justified.
Sure.
But why does it appear from a governmental and even a health perspective? I mean, even the WHO and others appear to be much more alarmed now than what they were with SARS and MERS. And I want to talk about Ebola because I think Ebola is slightly different. I'm not sure if it's slightly different, but in terms of this being a respiratory disease, why does it appear that COVID-19 is this alarming, even from people in the health profession?
So I've been asking myself that question since the outbreak. So as a coronavirologist, I've always thought that it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when we see the next coronavirus outbreak. I think it has something to do with the WHO and CDC and those type of bodies expecting the next, and I believe it's called pathogen X, to be this huge worldwide problem. So I think each time we see a pathogen with the potential to be this pathogen X, there will be a response. So unfortunately, this virus has come at a time where we see huge social media input, lots of input from various sectors, and there are calculations that says this next pathogen will kill 200 million people worldwide. So the expectation of this pathogen coming, each time we will see a new pathogen. Remember a couple of years ago when we saw swine flu?
Yes.
We saw exactly the same amount of panic. However, the containment was quicker, so it never spilled out into what we're seeing at the moment.
So let me get this right. Are you saying that there's something far worse that's on the cards and that people know about it?
No, so people do not know about, but if you look at the what is expected.
Yes.
Remember 1918, the Spanish flu
Yes.
during the First World War. Worst case scenario estimates says that during the 1918 Spanish flu, 100 million people died. Then in the 50s, 1956 about, we had another Spanish flu. Worst case estimate says 56 million people died. So if you look at those patterns, we're expecting something is due.
Yeah.
So each time we see a pathogen with potential, the health authorities are thinking this could be it.
I see. But certainly since the 1918s, our healthcare and our medicine has evolved. So to have our immune systems, to a certain degree, has adapted through time. So I mean, we're very far developed since then. Is it a fair comparison to make?
I think so. And please remember, I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a researcher. So all of this is based on my experience as a researcher. Why do you need a flu vaccine every year? Because the flu changes every year. If you look at how many people die worldwide of flu every year, It's between 350,000 and 750,000 every year. And this is just the flu, the prevailing flu that we have. What happens? So I'm speculating, I'm purely speculating now, and I hope I'm totally wrong. I think this next pathogen will not be a coronavirus. I think it would be an avian flu. So something from a bird.
Yeah.
Because currently it doesn't spread very easily between humans. But when a human does become infected, the mortality rate is very high. You look at figures, says anything from 20% to 60%.
Yeah.
So I do not think this is it. Based on what I've seen, based on my experience researching SARS during 2003, I do not think this is the one that we're all expecting. And I know it sounds very ominous, but I do not think it's this one.
Yeah, I just did a very simple search. Please forgive my ignorance. You know, whether bats or birds.
They're mammals.
They're not.
They're mammals. They're essentially mice with wings.
Yes. You know, at 100.4 FM, we have a professor in studio with us this morning. He's a molecular biologist. He studies, he's a virologist, studies coronaviruses, and we have him in studio to try and understand what we're sitting with, because the reality is we are all very much ignorant about how this is all developed and what we're sitting with. Even in the science and medical fraternities, I'm hearing people saying, yeah, we don't quite know, we're all still trying to find out. I mean, and if vaccines, for instance, worked for other coronaviruses, or at least for other types of respiratory diseases, isn't it simple to use the same vaccine?
No, it's not, because viruses are very specific. So viruses, for instance, has something that's called tropism, which means that a particular virus can infect a particular host. And viruses are so different that typically one vaccine does not work against the other. And remember, for none of our other human coronaviruses, we have a vaccine. The good thing was that since we've been studying SARS for so long, and since we've been studying the other non-lethal ones for so long, much of that information that was generated could be used in the study of COVID-19. So we have a slight head start.
But that worries me, because I hear the Germans, even the South Koreans, may have a hand at getting a vaccine very soon. They talk about, give us 3 months. They talk about, in the next 2 months, they could be making an announcement. This was what I heard in January. But isn't that a bit far-fetched if we don't have, an idea of what a vaccine could be doing? Because are we then just going to treat to try and mitigate the symptoms of the virus? Is it far-fetched to assume that a vaccine will come?
So it's probably not far-fetched. Remember, you mentioned earlier, technology has advanced tremendously. However, remember, with vaccines, it still needs to be tested.
Yeah.
So you need to prove that the vaccine is safe. You need to prove that it's specific to the disease, preferably, that's being tested. Are we sidelining all of that tests? Are we speeding up all of that tests? That's really the question. So in the end, even if it takes 3 months, if it takes 6 months, we need to be assured that in the end what we have is a safe, effective vaccine. And when I normally lecture, I would normally give the examples to my students of a feline coronavirus, so for cats. And there are papers that showed very good vaccine was developed. However, when the cats were vaccinated, and this is during tests, and they were exposed to the feline coronavirus, the symptoms became worse, so more cats died. So there's a risk. You need to test the safety of any vaccine, in particular this type of vaccine as well, because now you're talking about large-scale vaccination. Vaccination. You need to be very, very clear of safety, and it needs to be tested very, very well.
Is the way to put a lid on all of this, and from a vaccine medicine perspective? Because as you put it, I mean, for me, I don't have much confidence that we're actually anywhere close to finding a vaccine. We're going to have to wait on what those labs tell us in Germany and elsewhere. But is there a way from a vaccination medicinal perspective that one could simply put a lid on it, or what?
So initially with these type of novel outbreaks, we would test all the current available treatments. So I've seen some very interesting non-peer-reviewed studies. So it's not been verified by other researchers yet, coming from China, where they've used mixtures of antiviral cocktails. It seems to be effective in preventing severe symptoms from developing. So it's suppressing the virus in a particular way. These need to be verified in other countries and in scientific studies. So I think there is. But remember, SARS was essentially stopped by quarantine. So somebody would be positive, they would be quarantined. If they break quarantine, they would be forced to quarantine.
Yeah, which is what we're trying to do right now.
Which is what we were trying to do.
So would you say that as it stands, people are still in small numbers, still suffering or sitting or being infected with SARS, or have we put the lid on that one?
So it seems as though we put the lid, but remember, this is a zoonotic infection. So as long as the virus is found in the wild, there will always be the potential that it could jump back.
Life seems very much fickle now. You know, we go through great extents to try and live insulated and healthy and all of those things. I guess going for a run, it's going to matter, but, you know, at some stage...
You can join me for my run. We can run together.
Professor Burtram Fielding, he's in studio with me, molecular biologist, as well as a virologist, trying to unpack for us exactly what we're sitting with. We're going to go to headlines very quickly, and we'll continue our conversation. And I see all of your WhatsApp messages. There are loads of them. We'll try and attend to all of them this morning, but continue to chat to us on 0786 10 11 12. It's gone 28 minutes now before 9 o'clock.
Ads afterwards? Or
No, I'll come back immediately.
786 News that matters. At least 8 coronavirus cases have been recorded as a result of a local transmission. A 2-year-old child from the Western Cape is the country's youngest victim of the coronavirus outbreak. Schools are officially shut as of today, as the country effects all prohibitions as an attempt to mitigate the even further spread of the novel coronavirus. A travel ban also takes effect today, impacting travel to South Africa from the worst hit regions of the world. And Saudi Arabia has suspended all work in private sectors for 15 days. It is part of the country's efforts to contain the coronavirus outbreak. That's news making headlines on 100.4 FM, Radio 786. Stay tuned for the bulletin at 9.
NRN 100.4 FM, welcome. If you're just joining us now, we're talking about Covid-19 as we know it, the strain of coronavirus that the world is grappling with at this time. We have a molecular biologist in studio with us who has studied particularly SARS with the 2013 outbreak. The virologist that is EWC Professor Burtram Fielding. He's the Director of Research there at EWC, talking to us this morning around coronaviruses. Okay, so let's deal with Italy very quickly. I'm trying to understand. China happened, and we saw the doctor that broke the news. Was the supposed whistleblower in the first place. He unfortunately died. During the outbreak, and so on. We saw the way China responded, and China at the moment was virtually no increases in their cases. But how did things go so wrong in Europe, in particularly Italy? I'm trying to understand, because again, if you look at the numbers, do a breakdown of the numbers, death rate per million, it's still, again, it's relatively low. Not that I'm saying more people should be dying, but we are alarmed when we see so many new infections and new people dying each day. So how did things go so wrong in Italy?
Very difficult question. So I can purely base this on what we're seeing. And I saw a very interesting remark from a colleague from Italy. I'm on a group currently of COVID-19 experts, also coronavirus experts, and the colleague was saying the cities and the villages hardest hit. If you look at those villages, the average age of the inhabitants are extremely high. So I think we're seeing the same type of pattern where the elderly, those above 60, are hardest hit. Italy has the second highest average age in the world. So it appears as though this virus is hitting the elderly much harder. So those countries with highest average ages almost seems to be impacted harder.
Okay, which makes sense, because people with pre-existing health conditions, exactly, and the elderly, their immune systems find it a bit more difficult to fend it off, which makes sense. But also, what we understand from the method in how Italy went about it is that they were a bit delayed. I think one could say that they were a bit delayed in how they responded to all of this. And if I look now to South Africa, we're sitting at about 80 or so cases, all of which, or the majority of which, were cases that were imported into the country. What do you suppose? What do you make of the way we're reacting at the moment, from a governmental perspective? Well, at least from the restriction perspective, the prohibitions. Do you think that it's necessary, or are we taking it a bit too far?
So I might not be very popular for my opinion on this. I think we're taking it. I understand why it's being done, because we still don't understand this virus very well, and how it will play out in the end. I think we're taking it slightly overboard. I understand restrictions from those countries most heavily hit. Some of the other restrictions I do not quite understand, so it would be interesting to see the explanation behind that. So shutting of schools, for instance. 2003, during the outbreak, SARS outbreak as well, schools in China and Singapore and Malaysia shut as well for about a month. It opened shortly after that, because we then realized that the young were not, yes, they could become infected, but severity of the disease in them was almost negligible. We're kind of seeing the same in this virus, in COVID-19. So what is the sense of closing schools? So I'm a bit confused at the moment as to why we're seeing what we're seeing, why we're seeing the panic buy. So all of this, I think, is feeding into the panic as well. But I can understand. From a government perspective, it's something new. We have to protect the public. How do we do it?
Let's say we didn't do some of those things. Okay, as you say, we need to maybe restrict entry from those countries hardest hit. But let's say we don't do what government is trying us to do at the moment. I mean, you came in earlier, we were trying to decide, do we shake hands or don't we? I mean, what is the likelihood of seeing a localized spread en masse, to the point that you can find it living on surfaces, by shaking hands, touching of face, etc., etc.? Do you think that these measures are just hysterical at the moment, or is there a real justified reason for why we should have our armor up in the way that we do?
So I think there will be a spread. I think, and this might be unpopular as well, I think we need a spread to build up natural immunity in the population. I think we need to protect those that are most vulnerable. I ask myself the question, if you look at influenza, for instance, we have influenza outbreaks every year. In South Africa, on average, 110,000 severe cases of influenza, 11,000 deaths that can be linked directly to influenza.
11,000. But we don't hear of these deaths.
Exactly. Why are we reacting in this particular way to COVID-19, and yet we have something like influenza every year? Between 350,000 and 750,000 deaths worldwide for influenza every year. Why the response to this one? It's because it's new, we don't understand it, and that's why I'm a bit confused.
And I think that is justified. When you don't know, you become a bit more paranoid than what you ordinarily would. But earlier you said it is more virulent than other coronaviruses, and would, comparatively, for instance, to flu, is it more virulent?
So yes, it appears. So all of these viruses have what is called an RO number.
Yes.
So it's the potential of infection. So swine flu, for instance, has an RO number of 1.3 to 1.5, which means one person can infect about 1.5 other people. This COVID-19 has an RO of 2. So one person can infect 2 people who can infect 2 people. So you see, so the potential for spread is big. But still, keep in mind, 80% of people have mild symptoms. What about those where the symptoms are so mild they would not even know that they're infected? So yes, I understand that we need to protect, and that's what I'm saying. Let's not be paranoid, let's not panic, but let's be vigilant. We do have certain portion of our population that's at risk. Let's protect them. The same thing we do with influenza. We advise every year, we advise the elderly, and in influenza's case the young, and healthcare workers, because they would be the first in line, have your flu shot. So here we do not have a vaccine, but let's then isolate, let's then protect. So yes, the measures such as do not shake hands, sanitize your hands, yes, it can protect those vulnerable groups. So I'm all for that.
Okay, so if that is then the case, I mean, and I'm very curious to unpack your view when you say perhaps we should let it spread, because I'm sure no thinking sane person would say let people die.
Exactly.
But I, to be honest with you, had a very similar opinion, because what I'm told, and this is something I want for you maybe to, I know you're not a medical doctor, but in some cases people had contracted COVID-19 and they were free, and then they got it again. There were cases proven around the world where there's been an isolated few cases where people had received it again. So is that as simple as getting the flu again? That's part A of my question. The second part of that question is, if we do let it not spread, but if we don't have this mass hysteria around it, that we're going to try and build almost a natural immunity to it. If I get it now, is there a higher probability of me not getting it again?
So based on what we've seen for coronavirus, yes, you should be protected. Those cases that you mentioned, you're right. There are a few cases. However, the questions still need to be answered, I think. How were they tested initially? Were they just below the testing range of those kids, so they still had the virus? So I think more studies are needed. It needs to be understood better before we can make that conclusion. Remember how a vaccine works. We take our kids every year for
we give
shots.
You the virus.
Exactly, where we give you portions of the virus or weakened virus, so your body then becomes prepared. So when I say, and that's why I said it might be very unpopular view, and because any death is tragic.
Yeah,
I can just imagine if it's one of my family members.
Yeah. Would you feel slightly different if you had COVID-19? Or would you say
so I am not a risk case for the severe disease?
The severity of the case, yeah.
So I'm not an anti-vaxxer.
I want you to get
all for vaccinations.
I want you to get there. I want to talk about that quickly. Vaccinations.
Yes.
We don't have much time to talk about vaccinations on its own, but there are those that believe that, what if I just drink my ginger, my lemon and all of those things, I'm building up my immunity, should be sufficient. Even if I get the flu, I'm going to try and stave it off. And vaccinations, in fact, could put you at greater risk than what you think. And so where do you stand on vaccinations as a measure to either defend you from the flu or even a coronavirus?
So I'm all for it. I think studies have shown conclusively that it is protective. The initial studies that linked vaccines to autism and a whole range they've all been disproven. So all of those have been withdrawn.
But even if I don't believe that they have anything to do with what is it that you said now?
Autism
and stuff like that. With those special cases, right? Even if it's not linked to any of that, you're still giving me portions of the virus.
Yes.
That I could have if I keep up my immune and keep a strong immune and I exercise and I do all of those things, I may be able to naturally fend it off. Why should I then still take portions of a modified virus in order for my immune system to get used to it?
Because vaccines have become so effective and so safe that it is really not a risk. So it's not even viruses anymore that's used in those vaccines. It is portions of viruses, and extremely small portions. And it's the most, what is called immunogenic portions. So it's those portions of the virus that would elicit the best response, the best defense when you're exposed.
Yeah.
So the days where you have the majority of vaccines weakened viruses that could revert, that could cause that's almost long past. So it is much safer. So I'm looking forward to the developments in the COVID-19 field where we could end up with a vaccine or effective antivirals.
Yeah.
That could be used.
We have Professor Fielding in studio with us this morning. He is from UWC. He's a virologist, a molecular biologist, talking to us about coronaviruses and trying to find and separate the medicine and the research from the type of hysteria that we are witnessing. And I'd love to hear from you any questions that you have on 0786 10 11 12. Keep in mind that this is a researcher, not a medical doctor. So where possible, he will answer all your questions or try and attempt to do so. So let's go to the WhatsApp line. Assalamu alaikum to Shariq. Everyone's commitment is needed in the crisis, but more so as government. Why is it that I find nurses with negative attitudes? Because is it not possible that they might discourage a possible carrier to just walk away? And should there not be some accountability on their side? It's likely extremely miserable about the extra work. Okay, that's a bit of a comment. I always thought that this virus was called COVID-19 because of the way it infected people. I don't understand that. It is said that apes or monkeys also had or has the virus. Do they die? If not, can a vaccine not be found there?
So I've not seen any studies proving to the fact that apes and monkeys can be infected. We do know about bats at the moment.
Yeah.
And then some research groups have said pangolins.
Yes.
But we need to still identify the intermediate host.
Yeah.
So very few, for SARS, it was bat, civet cat, humans. For MERS was bat, camel, humans.
I see. So is the common denominator bats?
The bats.
Can't we get rid of all of them?
So there are millions of bats. Interestingly, groups in Germany and groups in Pretoria has looked at viruses found in bats.
Yeah.
And the number of viruses in bats are astronomical because they co-evolve. So bats are asymptomatic, which means they show no symptoms. And when you have mutation,
Yes.
randomly, of that virus, it can then move from the bat either to a different host or to humans, and you end up with a problem. But the bat remains infected but asymptomatic.
So, okay.
It's like saying...
Curious now, so how did the camel get it from the bat?
So obviously that could be pure speculation. So the theory is the bat would defecate on the feet of the camel.
Okay.
It would dry out and then become aerosolized into the airways of the camel.
Okay.
And from the camel, obviously, via droplets and the airway to the human. Remember, these are all respiratory viruses.
Yes. So in Wuhan, where we were told all of this emanated from a fish market because they...
It's a wet market.
Yeah, because they had been preparing bats either for consumption or something like that, which again is another contentious issue. And I really don't like lecturing people on what they should eat because it can be a very subjective thing. But is that the mainstream notion of where this virus came from? That it was a bat that could have been got in contact with humans at that market in Wuhan, and that is how we've seen the spread happen.
Not necessarily the bat in contact with humans. If you go to these wet markets,
yes,
you have various animals, all alive, all held together, all being sold as potential food. Remember, interesting, even with Ebola is linked to the wild animal meat market, the wild animal trade, monkeys. So this is not unique. Wherever you have wild animals, wherever you have domesticated animals, you have the potential of viruses moving to humans. Every year we take our dogs for shots at the vet. Have you ever read the label on those vaccines? One of the viruses in this is the coronavirus. It's a canine coronavirus.
I'm going vegan.
Then you end up with listeria and salmonella.
Oh no! We are doomed. We are doomed.
We need to be careful, and we need to understand what we're exposed to, and good hygienic practices can prevent much of this.
Well, if you have a caller, please be very quick. We're running out of time, and there's still a lot to get through. Assalamu alaikum and welcome. Yeah. Okay, all right. Thanks very much. And again, it's he's a professor, molecular biologist, not a doctor. But let's put this question to him, which is what I was asking earlier. If I drink my lemon water and things like that, can I not stave it off that way?
Thanks for the question, caller. So you raise a very interesting point, and it's been shown in the literature that garlic and turmeric is antibacterial. But remember, there is a difference between a bacterium and a virus. So antibiotics cannot be used against viruses. Antibiotics are used to treat bacteria. So if you have a bacterial infection, yes, it has been shown in the lab that turmeric and garlic works, but unfortunately antibiotics do not work against viruses. So for viruses you need an antiviral.
Yeah.
Because remember, bacteria are alive, viruses are not alive. A virus is a very simplistic organism that needs to get into a host to make more of itself, whereas
But
a
they're not
bacterium
alive.
is alive.
Yes, yes, yes.
Virus is not. So when you go to the doctor, for instance, with a bacterial infection, they can give you an antibiotic. You go to your doctor with flu, which is another virus. The antibiotic that they prescribe for you is not to treat the flu, it's to treat any secondary bacterial infections that you might end up with.
Yeah.
So effective against bacteria, not antiviral, as far as we know.
In our AM 100.4 FM, it's Radio 786. In the midst of a lot of, I guess, uncertainty and hysteria and panic around the coronaviruses, we thought we'll bring Professor Burtram Fielding to studio. He's a molecular biologist, has studied coronaviruses. He's in studio with us this morning. We're creeping up to 9 o'clock. There's about 8 minutes left, and I still have, chapters of messages and questions to go through. So we'll try and get through all of them very quickly. Assalamu alaikum. Curious to know what the simplest way is to treat symptoms of COVID. If in the respiratory part of the body, then is number one, raising the temperature of the body. So can we all go to the gym and sit in the sauna? Is that one way to do it? Increasing in vitamin-rich foods in order to help the body produce white blood cells. Are these not the best steps to take?
No, so be very careful as to Buddha-rata. We don't understand many of them, but really ask yourself the question, if you had flu, how would you treat it?
Yeah.
So remember, for flu, it is very much about resting, increasing fluid because you sweat, so you could become dehydrated. So it's all supportive.
It's supportive,
It's
but
supportive.
it's not.
So rest.
Yes.
Yes, you can take your vitamins to boost the immune system, etc., etc.
So
But there's no treatment. So
I hear you.
what would you do during a flu outbreak? Similar. Have those same questions.
Lay in bed, med lemon,
Yes.
Bob's your uncle.
Take care of yourself. Take things for pain, they're not feeling well. But you need to speak to your physician, obviously. And please, callers, keep in mind, 80% of COVID cases are mild.
Yes.
So it will feel like a mild cold.
Mm-hmm.
The remainder, more severe, but only a very small portion of that 20% ends up in hospital. I think it's 6% or something, where the symptoms are severe enough to end up in hospital, and then very small numbers dying.
Yeah.
Tragic, but a very small number.
Right, let's go back to the lines. Assalamu alaikum and welcome.
Morning.
All right. Okay. Thanks, Mohammed. I guess is in part what I asked earlier, whether there is an unnecessary exaggeration around COVID-19. And Iran, for instance, one can almost understand because their country has been sanctioned. They don't quite have a good health system. And I think there's context to the Iranian outbreak. But you did say earlier it is more virulent. But so on the one hand, you're saying it's important, but not alarming.
So I'm saying it's important. Take the precautions, the necessary precautions. But I'm saying do not panic. And there's a huge difference. And I understand why people are panicking. This is a new thing. Every day we get new information.
Okay.
So I appeared on I did an interview last week Friday, and I said this virus could probably, based on what I know, survive on surfaces between 24 and 36 hours. So Saturday evening, I receive information.
It's a few days now.
Few days. 2 days later, after I did my interview, and I said it with all confidence, I get information that says this virus can remain on surfaces, depending on the type of surface, between 4 hours and 9 days.
I read metal, especially metal, it can rest on there like between for 5 or 6 days.
That's now up to 9 days. So depending on the study that you're looking at. So even as researchers, we are learning something new about this every day. But the caller mentioned Iran, and he mentioned China, and he mentioned Italy. I understand. If you have a village where this virus is decimating really your aged, your older population, of course there will be panic. People are kind of looking at what are we seeing. The scientists and the medical doctors are telling us we don't understand this. How do we stop it? Quarantine has worked before.
Yes.
So quarantine is effective, but I think
it needs to go down for us to defeat it, for us to build an immunity against it.
That's what I would be inclined. But like I said, it's my opinion. And you could speak to 20 different researchers,
and they have different
and they will all have different opinions.
Such is the field of academics.
Exactly. If this was SARS or MERS that came, I would say shut down everything. 10%, 37% mortality rate, that is high. If this was an avian influenza that was moving through the population, I would say that easily moves. I would say shut it down.
All right. Do we have more callers? 021 699 1786. Assalamu alaikum and welcome. Right, 021 699 1786 if you have some more input this morning. In fact, we're running out of time. Is viral guard capsules good to use for building up of the immune system, increasing of white blood cells?
Keep on taking your measures that you've taken to build up your immunity. Everything can help. We do not understand yet this fully, but keep on doing. If you've taken viral guard during previous influenza outbreaks, keep on taking it.
Yeah. Somebody, I'm not sure if you're saying this tongue in cheek, saying given the research you're mentioning about the line of travel of the virus from the bats dropping on the camel dropping, so this is all about SHIT, meaning the Australians are right in fighting about toilet paper. What is that about?
I've been trying to figure that out. I think it is just people's fear if you quarantine for 2 weeks. For some reason, they worry that would be the first thing that they would run out of. So I'm not too sure based on that.
So here's a difficult question. I know we're right on top 9 o'clock, and it's come through quite a bit, right? I don't know. Maybe we should try and come back after news. We don't quite have the time actually to do so. But could this virus, and I know we did extensive discussion around the origins of the virus, from the bat hopefully to the camel, that in terms of SARS, and in this instance the wet market in China. There are a few people, more than a few, that tend to believe conspiracy theories, some of whom may believe that this could have been developed in a lab. And while in normal circumstances I would take this with a pinch of salt, you see countries, particularly China and America, jarring at the moment about the origins of the virus. China saying, no, it didn't even, somebody brought it here. You hear people in Iran, for instance, saying perhaps this was developed in a lab as a form of a biological weapon. I know you're a researcher that's guided by the facts and what the facts tell you. Is it possible to have produced a virus like this in a lab?
So I love conspiracy theories as well.
Okay.
So there are conspiracy theories, for instance, with HIV.
Yes.
Exactly the same. If we look at the genome and we look at the expertise that is needed, very few people would be able to generate something like this in the laboratory. And it would kind of be not wise to generate something in the laboratory that's not specific, that can kill everybody. So from the conspiracy theorists, doesn't match up with the science in this instance.
Not possible.
We've looked at the genome, and the technology, it's very specialized. So very, very, very unlikely.
But possible?
No, you're not going to get me to say that. Very, very unlikely.
Professor, we are out of time. You know, there are so many voice notes and messages that I'm very, very sorry we're unable to go through. Perhaps we'll invite the professor at some other time to come and answer some of your questions. I know some of you are giving us a lot of commentary around the virus and so on, and what your thoughts are about its origins and how it has morphed and developed. But unfortunately, we're unable to get through all of them. It's been a very fascinating almost an hour of trying to understand the virus and so on, which I think is needed. Rest assured, I'm feeling a bit comforted. I must tell you that this hysteria annoys me to a great deal. Yesterday I went home and I said, you know what, I'm switching off my phone. I'm going to take a nap. Just allow me to take a nap. Stop sending me the fake news. Stop asking me this 10 million questions and all of those things. I just wanted to go take a nap. Yeah. But I must tell you that given the spread and what we're hearing and so on, I do feel a bit nervous. And I am doing the sanitizer, I am doing the cleanliness thing. Do you think, even though you've tried to provide a bit more circumspect, or been more circumspect and tried to provide perspective about the virus, that you say don't be alarmed, but would you still say that we need to take those precautions around washing of hands, limiting contact, meter apart? Should we still be focusing on those basic things which we would in any case have done if there were to be an outbreak of the flu?
Definitely. So I do exactly, take all of those precautions as well. All of us know somebody in our family or circle of friends that could be at risk of developing severe symptoms.
Yeah.
So we need to be responsible, and we need to take those measures and religiously almost make sure that we do sanitize, we do wash, avoid contact. If you're ill, stay at home. Stay away from at-risk family. If this virus does spread, we do have people who are at risk, and their chances of developing severe symptoms is higher. So let's be responsible and take the precautions.
Thank you so very much for coming through, Professor. They are at UWC, a virologist. He is a molecular biologist talking to us this morning. Professor Burtram Fielding is the director of research on particularly having looked at the outbreak of SARS. And, we did stream live this interview, so you can go and have a look on Facebook. The discussion, if you did catch up a bit late to the discussion, but I do think we're going to try and do a bit more of this, so we can get to educate you around COVID-19, so you can be slightly informed around the decisions that you take and the precautions that you certainly have to take as we try to grapple with COVID-19. And again, as the professor says, he told me something last week Friday, by the Sunday things have changed, so every day we're learning something different and something new. And as time goes along, stay tuned to Radio 786 as we keep you informed about how to best respond to COVID-19. Thank you very much for coming through, Professor, and for a wonderful hour of a wonderful program this morning. We're going to go to news. It is slightly delayed, and do stay safe, keep your hands clean, and social distancing, all of those things. Continue to do that, and stay tuned to Radio 786 on 100.4 FM.